Welcome to Blue Fire's podcast, where we entertain you with tales of famous people you've never heard of. Each week, Steve, Lottie or Linda will guide you through the centuries to shine the spotlight once again on entertainers that history has forgotten. Join us for drama, interviews and the occasional chat over a bottle of wine as we discover that the topics of plague, poverty and overnight stardom are not unique to the 21st century.
And today we're very excited to welcome to our podcast the lovely Dr. Debbie Cannon. Debbie is talking to us all the way from Edinburgh in Bonnie, Scotland, and is going to be talking to us about Alice Thornton. More of her later. Debbie is a writer and an actor or actress, don't know which you prefer, and specialises in writing her own monologues and one-woman plays that she then performs, which are rather splendid. So, Debbie, hello, welcome, thank you. Tell us a little bit about you first, and then we can have a proper chat about the lovely Alice.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a writer and an actor. I'm based in Edinburgh, and I so about 3 years ago, I wrote and produced my first one-woman show, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is an Arthurian adventure, but retold from the point of view of one of the female characters. And last year, I wrote and performed a second solo show, which is the remarkable Deliverances of Alice Thornton. And that was inspired by a good friend of mine who is a senior lecturer in history at the University of Edinburgh, Cordelia Beattie, and she had undertaken some really interesting new research, and she wanted to stage it as part of the Being Human Festival. And the Being Human Festival, their ethos is making academic work accessible to people outside the academic world. So she was interested in seeing if we could put together some kind of stage performance around the work that she'd done. So that was where that came from.
Now, Alice, I've been reading a bit about Alice. Alice, I think, would have been quite at home at the moment because she lived through turbulent times, didn't she? This wouldn't have been new to her.
So she was born in 1626 and lived until 1707. So she lived through the civil wars, the beheading of Charles I, the Restoration period. So she lived through a really turbulent time. And actually, she was... to kind of give you a bit more background on her, she comes from quite a well-to-do family. She has sort of gentry connections on her mother's side and her father's side as well. And her father is sort of working in government positions, and then he ends up in Ireland working under Thomas Wentworth, Lord Strafford, the Lord Deputy of Ireland. And then when he is brought back to England, after which he ended up being executed himself, Lord Strafford, not Alice's father. Alice's father then takes on the role of Lord Deputy of Ireland. And this is at a time when there's lots of political upheaval there. Alice's father dies quite shortly after that, and the family have to leave Ireland quite quickly to avoid the violence there, and then they come back to North Yorkshire, which is where the family is originally from and where they have property, and they have her writings detail the various experiences and the difficulties they have kind of managing dealing with different forces there. So they have run-ins with Scots soldiers, which was quite a nice thing to put in the play for our original Scottish audience. Scots soldiers trying to invade their property, extort money from them, and also threatening her sexually as well. So there's all of that kind of thing going on. So on a kind of political public level, she's living through all kinds of drama and excitement. Well, excitement's perhaps not the right word. but on a private level as well, she doesn't have her troubles to seek. She has 9 children, only 3 survive. There are, a number of miscarriages on top of that. She loses large numbers of her family to illness and accidents and violence. The family's in a lot of debt, and they're kind of trying to manage that all the way through. And then around about the time when the piece of writing that she produced that the play is based on, so round about the time when that was written, there's a crisis in her family. Her husband's just died. She's become a widow, and there's just before actually he dies, there's a conflict with a young female member of her family who she's taken into her household, who is involved with the spreading of rumours about Alice, which just devastates her. And that's one of the kind of the motivating forces behind the writing that she does and the circulating of that writing through her family. So she wrote 4 manuscripts, which are a mixture of description of things that are going on in her family, so the loss of family members, births of children, marriages and so forth, and alongside that we've got references to the political situation, but we've also got very devotional text as well, and she structures a lot of her writing around what she describes her remarkable deliverances, which are times when she nearly died or presents herself as being extremely ill or nearly dying, and God having saved her. And for her, this functions as a kind of a proof of her goodness, although that's quite problematic. But we think that she was writing this material to kind of put forward a kind of a defense of herself and show that that she's fundamentally a good person because God has saved her all these different times.
So the complete opposite of a kiss and tell autobiography, then, really.
Very much not a kiss and teller. Definitely no kissing. I mean, she's quite conservative. She's a royalist. She's very, very religious. Very devoted to her husband. Although you do get the impression that it's a real love match, I think, for her and her husband. Even though she has a terrible time with him in terms of he's not good at managing money. And he's clearly not very well a lot of the time. There's a suggestion of quite a lot of physical illness, but I think mental illness as well. And both of them, when they're under pressure, tend to sort of take to their beds. So there's sometimes a bit of a blurry line between being able to tell whether that there is physical illness, pure and simple, going on, or whether it's mental illness that's kind of factoring into that as well. I think one of the really interesting things about what she writes as well is that kind of discussion of illness and what it means. Sometimes it's a defense for her. Sometimes it's a means for God to save her. Alice Thornton was a reasonably well-known figure based on the manuscripts that had not survived. We knew that there were 2 existing, and we knew where they were, and Cordelia found the other 2. It's a fantastic story how she did that. But so her research project that she's doing is hopefully, I think they've applied for funding to digitize all 4 of the manuscripts so that the writing can be kind of made available to everybody. But also it'll allow us to kind of compare and contrast the 4 different books and see, what the connections were between them and how she was revising things and going back and changing things in order to present herself in a different way. Because I think on one hand, she's kind of as a woman in her position and with everything that's going on around her, she's kind of not got a lot of control of her life, in as much as she depends on her husband to manage their money, and she's not kind of independent, as it were. She's very dependent on her family, but at the same time, she's the writing sort of allows her to present herself in a certain way and sort of construct an image of herself. And I think that was one of the really nice things to sort of draw on when I was putting the script together for the play. And the way that we sort of staged the play was that Alice was recounting her life and the deliverances that she'd had from God, and what she felt was a relationship to God, and she was kind of she was addressing this to God. So God is kind of the audience, as it were, which is obviously our biggest fear as actors. So yeah, it's kind of her exerting or establishing a little bit of control for herself, I suppose, there.
And sort of giving herself a voice as such, because women just didn't have one, did they? So.
Absolutely. I mean, I think on a local level, she's probably quite vocal within her community. That's the impression I get. But yeah, absolutely. In terms of, having a voice, which is a kind of a legacy, I suppose, or having a sort of a voice outside of that local community. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the writing is a really important way for her to be able to do that. And she was circulating the books within her family after she wrote them, as I was saying, partly as a kind of a vindication of herself, and I suppose partly as a kind of a religious educational text. So she passed them on to her daughter, who was then married to somebody who became the Dean of Durham Cathedral. Yeah. So his archive is at Durham Cathedral, and that's how most of this material survived. So, I suppose what we're seeing there again is women's, a woman's voice, but it's surviving because of the position of the man.
Yeah,
absolutely right. This is a chance for us to kind of hear this voice of somebody who we wouldn't have heard of otherwise. So I think that's lovely, and the voice is really personal, and there's a lot of very private stuff. So what we do have is that there are moments when there's emotional turbulence for her. I mean, I don't think anywhere near the amount that she probably experienced in real life, because she's presenting herself. She's very firm in her faith, but she goes through a huge amount. So while I don't think we get the full kind of emotional upheaval that she must have gone through, everything is very much, well, you're my God, this is what you're giving to me, I have to endure it. You do get hints of how awful it is sometimes. I mean, there's a section where her husband becomes very ill and she thinks he's going to die, she prays to God. She takes to her bed as well, because she's so distressed by this, but she prays to God to kind of save him, and he's saved. And there's this lovely passage where he kind of sits up at 3 a.m. or whatever and asks for toast, and she's kind of this passage is kind of followed with a prayer of thanks to God for saving him, and immediately after that her newborn child dies, and she has balanced this up between, oh well, I asked you to save my husband and he survived, but then you took my child, and how, and she kind of, you can see her kind of wrestling with this, where she sort of writes about, it's not for me to kind of judge this, you have a providential view of everything, and I think she actually starts that section with the phrase, it was God's pleasure to take my child, which sounds really uneasy to us, but so yeah, there's you get a sense of how difficult things are for her emotionally, even though her official line and what we get overwhelmingly is that she's accepting everything that's kind of thrown at her, but it's very, very difficult, clearly.
And it's also a really good illustration of the different time, isn't it? Because at around that time, the faith in God was absolutely everything. Everyone was really religious and just accepted stuff. It was and almost everyone knew their place in society as well.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, it's hard to put yourself in that headspace and appreciate what that must have been like, to have grown up with that and to live with that, and for that to be, your kind of your set of guidelines for how you lived your life and what would follow after. But I think what kind of struck me when I was working on the play very much was that it felt as though this religion kind of gave her a system to kind of make sense of what was going on in her life, because if you can't feel that there's a reason for the loss of all those children, or a reason for your king being beheaded and people dying all around you and violence and all of these things going on, if there's no kind of purpose or sense to it, then that to me is even harder to deal with. So I can see how you might end up clinging to something like that when your life was as hard as Alice's was, because it helps you to kind of make sense of things. And while I can't sort of put myself in that kind of mindset, I can try and understand it, but obviously there's no way I can kind of completely get there. I do. What felt comparable to me is that I have OCD, and I know that works for me as a system of establishing some kind of structure and control over things that feel like they're wildly out of control and are very scary in that regard. So I can that worked as a parallel for me, rightly or wrongly. It was kind of a way in for me with Alice, I think, and trying to appreciate a kind of a worldview, a very religious worldview that I can't completely understand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but you've obviously got a very good relationship with her.
I love her.
Yeah.
I do really love her, and I really sort of I admire her in lots of ways. I think she's tremendously strong, and while she kind of keeps talking about how she's going along with what the husband's doing, she has various male figures who she turns to for support, which she kind of has to, but she's kind of she's a very kind of strong central figure in her family, I think, through all of this. And what we read about with regard to her parents is something very similar. After her father dies, her mother brings the family back to England, and her mother is that really kind of strong central figure on whom everybody else kind of relies, and Alice sort of has to be, I think. And she's got her foibles and her weaknesses and her vanities and her little moments of pride, I think, that come out, but that's kind of nice, because that shows you her human side. I think, and we all have that, but I think she's a very strong character, and she'll kind of undercut things she says every so often with something that sounds a little bit humorous. Whether she intends that or not, I don't know. But
let's hope so. I'd love to think, because that's the other thing that always gets us through, isn't it? It's a faith in something, and it's a sense of humor.
Yeah,
sometimes, when things are really, really bad, that the only thing you can do is laugh at them.
Yeah, I know. Last time we were in the theatre sort of workshopping this, because we did the two performances for Being Human were last year in November at the Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh, and they were great. They both sold out. And we had
such a lovely venue, isn't it? I mean, that's just an aside, but I love it there.
Favourite place to work. It's just lovely, and the people are fantastic. But I did get a day in the theatre at the Storytelling Centre doing some workshopping on it with some friends last month. And one of the things that we were talking about was whether we think she ever intends to be funny, or whether it's all unintentional, because it's all delivered in a very straight way. I don't think she intends it, but there are nice wee moments, I think, and we managed to get humour into the play, which was nice. So
that's a good thing. And wasn't there a big scandal of sorts?
Yes.
Wow.
So Lottie.
Right. I've got a cup of tea, I'm ready.
Put your feet up. Hold my beer. So she there's a young curate comes to serve in the parish where she and her husband live, Stonegrave, and he's a sort of a high flyer of the church. He's been made a curate at the age of only 20. He's kind of been quite. He's made all these sort of significant achievements a bit ahead of time. So his name is Thomas Comber. And he comes and he becomes very, the family really take him in. They're both very fond of him. And Alice starts to rely on him for advice when her husband's incapacitated or unable to kind of offer her support. And she then, so Thomas Comber, the curate, approaches Alice and her husband when their eldest daughter is 12. The eldest daughter is another Alice, but they call her Nally. And he says he would like to marry the daughter, Alice. And actually what's interesting is in the book that they say that Nally is actually 14 at that point, and actually she was only 12. And whether that's a slip or whether this is Alice actually trying to cover over the fact that Nally was quite as young as she was when this happened, we don't know. But the parents agree to the marriage because Thomas Comber says, he knows that Nally's only very young, but he's happy to wait for her. He says he'll wait 7 years. He's 21, I think, at this point. So there's quite a big age difference. So they decide that this is, they'll agree to the the engagement, but they won't tell anybody because Nally's so young. So they decide to keep it secret. But Alice does share this information with the young female relative that I mentioned before, she's taken into her house. And this lady's called Anne Danby. And Anne Danby had was married to a nephew of Alice's. She had married him in Virginia without the permission of either family. And Anne Danby and her husband, Alice's nephew, had come back to Britain. The nephew had been sort of taken back into the bosom of the family, but Anne Danby was not welcomed. Anne is sort of, she's come without any money. Or not with a significant portion or amount of money, but she's also she's expecting things from the family, and there's a bit of negotiation that goes on with Alice acting as sort of a go-between, where she tries to arrange for some kind of allowance for Anne that both sides are happy with, and it never gets settled because Anne always wants a bit more, and the family are never willing to give her as much as she wants. And there's a lovely reference to how Anne expects the family to furnish her with silk stockings, and this is like, this is just outrageous that she's expecting this, silk stockings.
Praise and husty.
So Alice has taken Anne Danby in, and Anne is there without her children. The children and the husband are back with the husband's family. And Anne Danby, this young female relative, knows about the engagement between Nally and Thomas Comber, the curate. It's like an episode of EastEnders, isn't it, Lottie?
Just thinking that again.
So she knows about this, and then at some point there's an upset in the house because Anne Danby and Anne's maid tell Alice that one of Alice's servants has been spreading rumours, and this is the kind of the nub of it. We don't know exactly what was being said, but what we understand from the kind of the implications of what happened afterwards was that we think that the gossip was that Alice actually fancied Thomas Comber herself. And that she'd only agreed to the marriage because she wanted to kind of inveigle him into a closer relationship with the family, and she was only waiting for her husband to die so that she could then marry the young curate herself. So
that doesn't sound like the Alice I know.
It doesn't, does it? It doesn't at all. And Alice she put some legal documents into the hands of Thomas Comber to look after for her. So there was a kind of a bit of talk about that, and how, she was kind of giving information to him that might be used to kind of undermine the husband, or so there's a suggestion of betrayal of both. Not that she'd had an affair, definitely not that, I don't think, but that she would kind of fancy doing it, and that they might, she was kind of looking ahead to a possible second husband, and this young man, who's like over 20 years younger than her at this point. But also, obviously there's the implicit betrayal of the daughter there, that she's just using the daughter in order to kind of get closer to this young curate. So Alice is obviously extremely upset about this. And what's worse for her is that when she sort of expresses her distress to Anne and Anne's maid, that Anne and the maid simply laugh at her. They mock her and laugh at her, and they kind of, and especially the maid in particular, says, your family's nothing. You're not. Your family is nothing. And that
the maid says this.
The maid says this. I know. And actually, it was interesting because when we got feedback after we did the performance in the Storytelling Centre from the audience, everybody had a feedback form, and I think there was one or two people said, really, would the maid be doing that? And actually she did. It's all in there in the writing. The maid, spoke to Alice like this, laughed at her, told her that, her family was nothing and Alice was nothing. And that obviously really, really hurt her, that her family was nothing. It's kind of, pulling her right down to insignificance and upsetting the social order, I suppose, as well. And Anne doesn't defend her. Anne kind of joins in, and in the end, Anne is ejected from the house, although Alice kind of makes quite a big deal of the fact that she'd argued with her husband to say, look, no, we should let her stay. She's on her uppers. We need to support her. And then when Anne finally does leave, she makes sure she mentions that she sends her off with an allowance, so yes. I remain generous, as it were. And shortly after that, her husband does die, and that's the point when she's doing a lot of writing and revising a lot of previous writing to kind of circulate around the family. Because I suppose what we imagined in the play is kind of located at the point on the day of the husband's funeral, and Alice is imagining having to go to the church to the funeral, which is being officiated by the young curate, and having to face all the local community and she doesn't know how many of them know about these rumours or not. So she doesn't know whether they're going to be talking about her or not, or whether they're going to be watching her and watching the young curate. She also doesn't know if Anne Danby's going to come to the funeral, and that's all kind of fictionalized for the point of view of the play. Obviously, none of those concerns are sort of written in Alice's books, but we
it may
imagine
have happened
that this would be something that would really be weighing on her, that she has to go out there and show public face, and she has to and there was one bit that I put in the script where she's kind of going, I can't cry too much because people think that I'm overdoing it for effect, but I have to cry enough so that people think that I genuinely am sad that my husband's died. So I have to cry the correct amount. And how do I do that? So that kind of moment of crisis for her is where we kind of located the play.
And that kind of thing is something that it's really relevant today, because you think of all of it, it's slightly different, but you think in terms of a strident woman is a strident woman and a harridan. If she if it were a man distributing the same traits, then he would be a strong leader. And it's no different. If I cry too much, I'm hysterical female. If I don't cry enough, I'm a hard-hearted bitch. Things don't change, do they?
No. And actually, I think that's been something that's interesting to think about, in terms of the fact that Alice does quite often, she does kind of experience all these illnesses, all these kind of physical breakdowns she takes to her bed, and it's almost as if when things get too much, she falls back on, I suppose, something that's kind of like something that's allowable for a woman in her position. That people aren't expecting her to kind of, if you and I, Lottie, have a crisis, people are a bit like, right, come on, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to sort it? Whereas for Alice, it's like, oh, it's overwhelming, I'm just going to go back to bed. So I think that's kind of allowable for her. So she sort of falls back on what's maybe expected or safe for a woman to do at that point.
That said, there are times over the past few months when I've just wanted to hide under my duvet.
I know. Oh God, yeah, I love my bed. You're quite right. so many mornings. I mean, today with like, we're obviously recording this on the day of the US election, and there's a significant part of me that's thinking, I just want to go to bed and get up when it's all done.
When it's all over.
Alice, as I say, lived for a good period after her husband died. So, that's she's writing, the husband's dying, and she's writing round about 1668, 1669, and she lives till 1707. Nally does marry Mr. Comber, and he goes on to become Dean of Durham Cathedral.
Yeah.
So that's how the book survives, as I was saying. So
And so did she, when she first wrote books, obviously for her family, but was the intention that it would be perhaps publicised and published for a wider audience, or
I don't
was
think
that a happy accident?
I don't kind of get the impression that that's what she's aiming for. I mean, it looks as though they were just designed to be circulated within the family, and I think some of it's quite private. There's something about when her older brother dies. Oh, I think, now I'm going to say this, and if it's wrong, I'm going to apologise in advance, but I think, so her brother comes to visit her, older brother, who's now the head of the family at that point, and she, when he leaves the house, she gets a pain in her neck, I think, and she remains like that. He then goes off and he tries to cross the river, I think it's the River Swale, she tries to cross the river on horseback, and he's drowned. And I think the pain doesn't go away until after he's died, and there's a kind of a spooky thing. She implies that it was a spooky kind of supernatural foresight thing, or I suppose psychic connection, we might call it now, something like that. But then at the very end, she says something about how she'd actually been brushing her hair with her head over to one side. It's like, it's obviously not that. It was, it was mad.
There's something quite sad about the whole thing, really, isn't there? She's obviously a woman of, for her time, of some influence and of status, and she still has to feel the need so much that she's got to write it all down to tell these people the way she feels and what she's actually been doing because of other people's poison. I mean, I think that's terribly sad. I was kind of expecting, for her to have written these books, and we were saying the other day, Samuel Pepys wasn't the only diarist of that era. Look at Alice, but she was coming at it from quite a different angle, wasn't she? It was so private.
Well, I think, I mean, she starts, when she's writing originally, I think it genuinely is, partly it's recording kind of family significant events, and also partly, the reasoning is that she wants to record these deliverances because, I suppose it shows her devotion and her gratitude to God, and she wants to share that. And I suppose
it gives her something to hang on to as well, doesn't it? Because if she can look back on the good stuff, because just that little story there, and her brother as well. What else is going to happen to this woman?
I know, but yes, you're quite right. I mean, the crisis, I think, is the thing that really pushes her into rewriting, re-editing, getting this material out to the family so that she can kind of vindicate herself. She's a really interesting character, and I do have a lot of sympathy for her. I think, she's a very hard life, and one of the lovely things about it is how much the sort of the local and the personal, that local community that she has, how that is her world in a lot of ways. And actually the crises that happen, they are the big dramas in her life, almost more than the big political things. What I should mention as well is, I've mentioned Cordelia Beattie, who is the lecturer in history, Edinburgh University, is behind all this research. He's a really an old friend of mine. I've known her for years and have a huge amount of love and respect for her. So it was fantastic to work with her. But I also got to work with Flavia Davila as director, and again, a very good friend of mine. And Jen McGregor, the writer and director, did some dramaturging work on the script with me, and she, the reason that kind of came into my head actually was that when we were kind of having one of our sessions, how did she phrase it? We were talking about the fact that, you know, the private and the local is Alice's world. And, you know, I can't remember exactly how she said it, but it was basically something like, you know, we're all living through history, but we just don't realize it. You know, big events are happening round about us, and we're kind of like, oh, haven't done the ironing, you know. And you kind of get that with Alice, and it feels very human when you get moments like that. Even though, you know, as I say, the kind of the overriding structure on the books is this devotional style of writing, and a relationship with God that, you know, as I was saying, I can't completely get my head into, because there's just no way I could. So yeah, I love her.
And is there a neat little extract you can give us from the play? Because to my shame, I haven't seen the play, but I want to.
Oh, that's all right. We'll be back.
Okay. We're all going to be back, Debbie.
Yeah, we will all be back. We're sure. So this is a section when she's talking about her childhood, and what I did in the play script was I kind of shifted between text that I wrote in Alice's voice, and then we had excerpts from her books, and on stage I would open a little book to kind of indicate that she was sort of reading a passage that she'd written. So the excerpt that I'm going to kind of read for you now starts off with text that I've written, and then it goes into text from Alice's book, and then it shifts back to something that I wrote again. So be interesting to see if you can tell the difference.
Okay, on the radio.
Yes, exactly. So of all the lives lost and preserved each day, I have always been one of the saved. But looking back, there have been so many times when death reached for me, and I clutched onto life so tightly. I would not let it go. And I have wondered how it will feel, like ice in my mouth, or a burning sword, or an embrace. It is another thing I cannot know. You must have had reason for me to stay. This is your choice to make. My life balances in your palm. Where is the deliverance from the swing? In 1632, it pleased God to give us safe passage to Ireland, in which place I enjoyed great joy and comfort, having the fortunate opportunity of the best education that kingdom could offer, and the advantage of society in the sweet and chaste company of the daughters of the Earl of Strafford, Lady Anne and Lady Arabella Wentworth. One day, when I was 10 years old, I was invited to dine with Lady Arabella and Lady Anne and my cousins. The ladies, using the custom to swing by the arms for recreation, they would make me, being a young girl, do the same with them, and I did so, and could hold very well by the arms as they did. But at this time, very unfortunately, they bid one of the pages, a French boy, to swing me, they being weary with play. I cried out, desiring them not to bid him, but could not get off so soon from him. He immediately pushed me so violently from him, with that he throwed me down upon the chamber boards. Both my chin and chat bones was almost broke in sunder, and a great lump as big as an egg rose under my chin, which suddenly astonished me and took away my breath, insomuch as I was nigh death. Till by the great mercy and power of my gracious God, I came to myself again. For a good space of time, the ladies believed that I was dead, but I knew I was alive. I knew this most of all because I understood you could have let me die. I understood it perfectly, for perhaps the first time in my life. Death waits behind me always. His hand hovers above my shoulder. I wonder if the ladies really were so very tired. I thought I heard them laughing as I fell.
Oh, so she's self-aware as well, isn't she?
Yeah. I mean, in the original, she doesn't, in her writing, she doesn't ever suspect. There's not a suspicion that the girls might have, let her be pushed, or laughed at her when she fell. But when we were working on it together, myself and Flavia and Jen, we felt that there seems to be a sort of a recurring theme of mean girls with Alice. That she's such a good person, and she's so sort of focused on saying what a good person she is and obeying the rules. And actually, there might be female figures around her like Anne who are definitely not obeying the rules and are also kind of having a bit of a laugh at her for her focus on her virtue. And we thought it might be nice if the Wentworth daughters were also mean girls to her. So there was just like a recurring theme there of women kind of laughing at her and her fear of being laughed at, I suppose, more than anything else.
Which again goes back to why she started writing in the first place. She's
absolutely. Bless her. I think she feels like she's obeying all the rules, and so why are things not working out? I'm doing all the right things. Why are bad things still happening?
Well, look, thank you so much for that. It was fantastic insight into her. I love her. Pleasure. And just before we say goodbye, as they say, a couple of quick things. First quick thing is the on-the-spot question of, apart from Alice, who's coming to your fantasy dinner party?
Well, you told me I could have 6.
You can.
But I am pulling in an extra chair so you can come as well.
Oh, thank you. I don't mind doing the waitress thing. Pour the drinks. You're
there. You're definitely there. So I've got you, me, and Alice, and I'm going for 7 because you're squeezed in. So the first person I thought of was Dawn French. I absolutely want to have dinner with Dawn French because I think she would be an excellent dinner companion.
So do I. Dawn, if you're listening, well,
call me. I'm here. I'm by the phone. And I think she would be a nice counterpoint to Alice probably as well, as the Vicar of Dibley.
I was just thinking that they could have a theological conversation.
It could work out quite nicely. And actually, I also wanted to bring in the Gawain poet, because my first solo show, as I was saying before, is Green Knight, which is based on the medieval poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. But we don't know who wrote it. We don't know who the poet was. So wouldn't it be amazing if I could have the Gawain poet at the dinner party? And I mean, how's that for a big reveal?
Wow.
That's drama right there.
That's proper drama as we live and breathe. Yes, mystery guest.
That's about the whole thing. How does it feel to, be anonymous? So definitely those people. A lady called Maggie Aderin Pocock, who is a space scientist, and she presents Sky at Night some of the time, and she's amazing. So I would love to have her there as well. She knows so much and she's so enthusiastic about it all, so definitely would like her. And actually the last person that I wanted to have was one of my grannies, because I didn't know my grannies, and unfortunately I can't have both because we're limited on numbers. So I would have one of my grannies there, because I think that would be a really interesting.
And so, poet of Green Knight, who knows? Male, female, it could be anyone.
Well, it could be. I mean, there is a train of thought that suggests that it could have been written by a female, could have been written by a woman. I think probably chances are it was a man, but we can't rule out either way. So.
No, keep an open mind on that one. Absolutely. Super, right.
It would be like stars in their eyes. Well, not stars in their eyes. It would be like a, surprise, surprise, where the door would open for the Gawain poet and everybody would be like, oh, it's you. Very cool. I'm really warming to this idea now.
I'm liking this idea. Yeah. In fact, I'm seeing a whole new television series where celebrities could be the Gawain poet. Come up. Yeah. I'm sure someone somewhere can pick that up and run with it.
Yeah.
So is Green Knight going to be on anywhere else at a theatre near us when the theatres are open?
Hopefully, yeah. So we have it was meant to be on in March in Cambridge at the ADC Theatre, but that was just when lockdown was announced, so it didn't go ahead, obviously. So at the moment we're scheduled to do it at the very end of March into April in 2021, again at Cambridge at the ADC. It was meant also to be on during the Fringe in Edinburgh at the Scottish Storytelling Centre, which is just something I've wanted to do for years. So I was quite heartbroken it didn't happen, but hopefully we'll get back there if they're willing to have us at some point. So definitely those two places. And once things seem to open up again, it's my mission is to try and get out as many places as possible, because I think it's one of the really nice things about it has been kind of taking it to new audiences a bit further afield. I mean, I had it in Buxton and I had it in New York in February, which was lovely. So the more I can sort of get that out and about, the better. And hopefully, we'll get a bit of Alice out and about next year as well. So yes.
Well, keep us posted, and come back on and talk to us about the Green Knight, because famous people you've never heard of. Who's ever heard of the author of the Green Knight poem? Because we don't know who it is.
That's a really interesting story too, Lottie. So yes.
There we go. Come back, series 2, and by then hopefully we'll have some firm dates for everything, and we can all get our diaries out and start booking a real life again. Super. So thank you very, very much for your time today. It has been
my pleasure. Thank you.
It's been an absolute joy, and just getting to know these people is wonderful, and I'm going to find out all I can about the lovely Alice. So thank you very much, and good luck with all the new bits and pieces.
Oh, thank you so much, Lottie.
It's always lovely to speak to Debbie. But to end today's podcast, we're going to hear from the person who started the whole project and actually found those manuscripts. So here for the last word today on Alice Thornton is Cordelia Beattie.
The play came about because I saw a funding call for the Being Human Festival on the theme of discoveries and secrets. And I'd recently made a discovery and I was keeping it a secret. So I'd managed to track down 2 missing Alice Thornton manuscripts. One hadn't been seen since the 1930s when it was copied. The other one hadn't been seen since 1875. When I say track down, actually the first manuscript was showed to my dad by a neighbour in the pub. So there was a bit of serendipity there. But I then traced the other one to Durham Cathedral Library, where it was miscatalogued as being the writings of Thomas Comber's wife, who was actually Alice Thornton's daughter. So I knew I wanted to talk about Alice Thornton, and she's obviously living through a really interesting period in history in terms of the British Civil Wars. There's fighting in kind of Ireland as well as in England. There's the plague, there's the Great Fire of London. These are all things that she writes about. But when I was reading the manuscript in Durham Cathedral Library, I was struck by how this is a woman who's writing around 1668, just after her husband's died, looking back at her life. And it's often punctuated by illnesses and deaths in her family. And so when I pitched the idea to Debbie, I was thinking about Maggie O'Farrell's memoir, I Am, 17 Brushes with Death. And Debbie thought this was kind of a great initial idea, that we would talk about these kind of brushes with death. So some are quite serious. I mean, she nearly dies in childbirth a number of times. She has 9 children, only 3 make it to adulthood. But some of the brushes with death are, it seems like she's maybe kind of over-egging it a bit. So she talks about how she eats a piece of lobster and vomits a lot. And she's like, I nearly died. Another time she tells a story of when she's a child in Dublin. She's playing on a swing with her friends, falls off, hits her head. Everyone thinks she's dead. She isn't. But that's also told as a near-death experience. So when Debbie was then working up the play, she felt that we needed more of a kind of a narrative hook, though, to draw this together. And she seized on this idea of a scandal that Alice hints at quite a lot in her writings, sort of dances around it a bit. And And this is kind of rumours about her and the local vicar. So she actually says in kind of 1668, this is another of her near-death experiences, that people were gossiping about her. There's this kind of false slander that makes her take to her bed, and she thinks she'll never recover from this, from the plague of slanderous tongues. So we've got this kind of near-death experience, but actually the slander is something that structures the books in the sense that she's writing a defense of her life and telling us that God has saved her from kind of birth onwards, that he saves her for a reason, that she must be a good woman, and that the fact that she's had so many near-death experiences, I think that's kind of about 30 of them, that this is this kind of proof that she hasn't had an affair with the local vicar. So Debbie kind of puts all of that into the play, and I think she does a really good job of both using Alice's own words but also kind of building on them. And I think Alice is a bit of a kind of a Marmite figure. So yes, she does kind of moan on a lot, but there's also kind of a bit of humour to kind of some of these episodes, particularly when she's kind of moaning about some of the women that she's fallen out with over this kind of gossip. So I do think that she makes a great character for a play, and obviously that's important when you've got a one-woman play. One of the other things that we were trying to achieve is maybe kind of get people to think about what it was like to live in a period of kind of momentous change. I mean, we've got very interesting kind of political situation at the moment. We've got our own plague, but probably our own dramas are kind of a centre stage in that. And so with Alice's story, you get that kind of sense of dealing with the kind of the day-to-day problems while living through these kind of big events, as we are as well.
Thank you for listening to Famous People You've Never Heard Of. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please rate, review and subscribe so that other people can find us more easily and you'll never miss an episode. If you'd like to support our work, it's easy to do. Just go to www.patreon.com/Bluefire Theatre. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter.